Hello, this is Music Tech Help Guy, and welcome to episode 56 of my Logic Pro 10 video tutorial series. In this episode, we're going to take a look at some advanced MIDI techniques. One of them is called round robin, also known as alternating samples, and the other is called velocity layers. I'm also sort of pairing this with sampling acoustic drums because these two advanced sampling techniques are particularly useful when trying to create hyper-realistic acoustic drums. But they can be used for any instrument. I just happen to find them most useful for working with acoustic drums. So in advance, I built a sort of just a basic acoustic drum kit out of some samples that I purchased online. So you can see all of my samples here are pretty clearly labeled. These are just the names that the company had on them already. And you can see that I've got basically just one note per key, and I'm sort of following the GM drum kit, not perfectly, but pretty close. So let me just show you what the kit sounds like. All right, so that's just what a few of the samples sound like, but I've only got one sample per key right now. So what a round robin effect will do for us is it allows us to take advantage of the fact that sample companies will often record multiple strokes of the same sample. For instance, I've got 5 kick drums up here, or 5 or 6 floor toms down there. So you can alternate them rather than just playing the same sample over and over again for a more realistic sound. So let me just play you an example of what I have right now. So one of the things you'll probably immediately notice about that drum pattern is that anytime there are samples like this where they're repeated, in a series, especially with the kick drum, and over here where I've got some double kick stuff going on, anytime you have these sort of samples repeated in series, if you don't use an alternating samples or round robin technique, it's going to sound kind of fake. It's going to sound it's going to sound like a drum machine. And so the whole goal here is to change the tone slightly from drum hit to drum hit so that it sounds a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to go into my edit window, and to set this up, I'm going to need to stack multiple samples on each of the keys that I want to create a round robin technique with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to off screen this. And while I'm off screen, I'm just going to load in like 2 or 3 more samples on each one of these samples. And then I'll come back and I'll show you how to actually set up the round robin technique. All right, I'm back. And what I've done in the meantime is I have loaded, as you can see, 4 samples on most of the keys, 3 samples on some of the keys as well. And there is one key with only one sample, or a couple of keys with only one sample, but that's okay. So basically what I've done is for the kick drum, the rim tap kick drum, the snare drum, the hi-hat, the low and high tom, I've loaded 4 samples on each of those keys. And then for all of the cymbals, there was like the crashes, the rides, there was like a sort of like a China cymbal in there as well. Those I only had 3 samples for, so I loaded 3 samples on those keys. Now, the way round robin works is you have to create, unfortunately, a group for each sample that you want in the round robin series. Or if you're working with sets of samples like this, where I have several of them that are 4, several of them that are 3, you can just make one group for each I guess set of samples. So what I'm saying is that for the group of 4 samples, in order to create a round robin effect, I'm gonna have to create 4 groups, and I'm gonna group all of those samples into those 4 groups. And then for the ones that have 3, I'm gonna have to create 3 more groups. Because the way round robin works is it doesn't actually cycle through samples, it actually cycles through groups. So the first thing I'm gonna do is go to View, Zone Group, and I'm just going to kind of ungroup all of these samples from their current groups because I've already got some groups over here. So I'm just going to ungroup them all. So I'm just going to pull the group assignment over to the left here, hit Command A to select everything, and then I'm just going to change the group assignment to ungrouped. And then now I can go ahead and just delete these groups over here. So there's nothing in them anymore. There we go. The next thing we need to do is go to the groups view, and we need to create 4 groups for the groups of 4, and we need to create 3 groups of the groups of 3. One thing I will say about the EXS24's ability to create a round robin technique is, I will say it's a bit convoluted. You really have to do some weird things to get it to work. There are easier ways to do this with other samplers. One in particular is battery from Native Instruments. So I'm sure someone will mention that in the comments, but it is what it is. This is the way you have to make it work. So to create our groups, we go to Group, New Group, or you can remember the key command Control G. So I'm going to create 4 groups for the group of 4, and I'll just double click on these and name them RR4-1, RR4-2, 4-3, and 4-4. There we go. So now we need to create 3 more groups for our groups of 3 here. So I'm just going to go back to the groups view, create 3 more groups by hitting Control G, and I'll just name these, you guessed it, RR3-1, 3-2, 3-3. There we go. My screen capture software, as I've said before, just bugs out Logic sometimes. It just doesn't, like, I click on something and it, like here, I say I double click on it like 10 times before it actually works. All right, there we go. So I've got all these, I've got groups created for them. For the samples that just have one sample, I'm going to create another group for those, and I'll just call it single, single sample. You don't have to, but I'll do it just for organization. Okay, so we need to now assign these samples to their corresponding groups. So I'm going to drag over, just holding Shift while I do it, drag over all of the groups of 4 and assign them all to RR41. And then I'll drag over all the groups of 3 and assign them all to RR31. And lastly, I'll just put the single samples in the single group. All right, so now all of my groups of 4 are in 4-1, all of my groups of 3 are in 3-1, but that's not really how I want them separated. What I really want is I want each sort of group of instruments, like my 4 kicks or 4 snares, to be in group 4-1, 4-2, 4-3, 4-4 in succession. So we're going to have to do some individual sort of grouping here. So in the end, we want this to sort of play in a sequence, so 4-1, 4-2, 4-3, 4-4. With the snare drum, same thing, 4-1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to have to kind of manually go through these and set the group assignment. And right now, my samples are kind of disorganized because I didn't load them all in at the same time. If you just like load in all of your samples at the same time, it's going to make it much more easy to do this. So again, I'm just going to click on one of my samples here, click on the first one, make sure it's on 4-1, click on the next one, go to 4-2, the next one, go to 4-3, and then the last one, 4-4. And so I'm going to do that for each set of these. All right, I decided to finish that up off screen. But now I have my samples equally distributed across my different groups. In order to set up the actual programming to make the round robin effect work, we have to open up this group select group by column. And what this does is it allows a group to be selected by another group, or it allows a group to be triggered by another group. So what we're going to do is in the type column, we're going to set these all to group, except for single. That'll just be off. And let me just make this a little wider here. Okay, well, this is obviously another glitch that my screen capture software is causing. I'm not really sure why I can't make this column wider. I normally can, but oh well. Anyway, what the select group by column does is it allows us to make a group be triggered by something. And in our case, because we selected type, we're going to make a group be selected, be triggered by another group. So what that means is when we play a sample that's in 3-1, what's going to come next is a sample in 3-2 and then 3-3, and it goes through the list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 3-2 be triggered by 3-1 and 3-3 be triggered by 3-2. We don't have to make 3-1 triggered by 3-3 though. The round robin sort of list will automatically sort of loop back around. And so now I just need to do the same thing for the 4 groups. So 4-2 be triggered by 4-1, 4-3 by 4-2, 4-4 by 4-3. And there we go. So that's how you set that up. All right, so as long as I set up everything correctly, we should be able to test this out, and we should see that our samples now alternate. So the kick works. Let's try the snare. So I've got like one open hi-hat in there for some reason. I'm not really sure why, so I'm just going to go and swap that sample out. All right, so I just tweaked a few things off screen. Let's save this and let's give this a listen. All right, so you can see from the bottom display there that we're not just using the same sample over and over again anymore. We're kind of alternating between them, so it creates a little bit more of a natural sound, especially with the kick drum. A lot of people will probably say, "Man, that's really difficult to do. Do I have to do that every time?" No, you can always save your instrument as a channel strip setting, and as long as you saved the instrument along with the channel strip setting, and you also make sure the samples are in the right place at all times, you can recall that kit anytime you want. So I do this a lot for drum replacement and drum programming. I just have a certain set of kits that I've created in advance. All right, so up next, we're going to talk about velocity layers. So I'll be right back. All right, up next, let's talk about velocity layers. Before we do that, let me just show you what I've got going on here. This is essentially a very similar kit to what I just had up before with Round Robin, except what I've done is I've removed the alternating samples. I just have one sample per key, and I've also swapped out the kick and snare. So what velocity layers allow you to do is they let you switch between different samples all loaded onto the same key based on velocity. So the harder or faster you hit the key, or the higher the velocity value of a note, will determine which sample is actually played back. So this gives us more of a, as opposed to like a repetition variance, it gives us like a volume dynamic variance. So let me play just a basic drum pattern that I pre-composed. So you'll notice it sounds really robotic, and most of the volume and most of the dynamics are all the same. And that's because I've constricted the dynamics here. So if you pull this out, there'll be more of a volume change with lower velocities. So the green notes, the lower velocities are played a little bit softer now, but they're still basically the same sample, the same dynamic. So I'm going to pull that back up. You also want to make sure that your first one of your routers says sample select in the destination and the source says velocity. That's normally automatically set up, but just double check to make sure that's there. All right, so let's start with the kick drum. What I'm going to do is go to zone, load multiple samples, and I'm going to load in a few more samples on my kick drum note. Now, this set of samples that I bought, instead of having sort of repetitious hits, it has velocity layered hits. So basically, the larger numbers are louder volumes, louder dynamics. He hit the drum harder. And the lower numbers are softer dynamics. He hit the drum softer. So I'm just going to kind of pick a few of these, just pick and choose a few of these. You can actually create velocity layers with, up to 127 samples. I don't want to go crazy. I mean, 3 or 4 is going to be fine for this. So let me just load these in. They're probably not going to get mapped to the right key. No, they won't. So let me just throw these where they need to go just by manually dragging them. And let me just go ahead and group them all together. I'm just going to group all the kick drums together. Just you don't have to for velocity layers. It's just I'm going to do it just for just stay organized. So let's drag over those, and I'll go zone group, and then let me choose group 2. That's the name of the group for all these. So they're all in the same group, and then I'll just double click on that and. Let me just, same glitch as before. Let's double click on that and we'll name it kicks. There we go. So all of our kicks are in there. They're a little out of order. I want them to kind of be in, lowest to highest or highest to lowest just for organizational purposes. So I can just click on name here and it'll organize them numerically or alphabetically. And then I'm going to open up view zone velocity. And what I'm going to do is hit Command A to select all. And then turn velocity layers on. That should have selected all of them. Right now, if I play this note, it's actually playing all of them. It's actually playing them detuned as well. Let me turn off pitch over here. But it's just playing them all at the same time. So what I need to do is break up each sample into a different velocity range. So the loudest one, I'll say 100 to 127. The next one, say 85 to 99. The next one, let's do 70 to 84, and then maybe the last one will do 0 to 69. And so I've broken up the range for each sample. Let's do the snares next. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. Go find my snare drums. These snares, the same as with the kick drums. The set of samples I purchased are in velocity order, so the softer ones are lower numbers, the louder ones are higher numbers. So let's just pick and choose a few of these just like I did before. There we go. We'll add them in, hit done. Let's use the drum map. Again, it's probably not going to put them on the correct key, no. So I'll have to kind of manually drag them to place. And just like we did before, I'm going to create a, I'm just going to, whoa, there we go. That's right, they're detuned. I'm going to put them all in the same group, name that group snares, and then just set each sample to a different velocity range, just like we did with the kick drums. All right, so I have all my kicks and snares set to velocity layers. Let me just try to demonstrate this with the velocity tool out in the piano roll editor, but you should hear that the actual sample changes as I drag higher or lower. All right, that sounds way better than before, especially the snare drum. The snare drum and those softer notes really has sort of like a pattery sound to it and less of a thwacky sound to it. So that's great. Kick drum probably needs a little bit more tweaking. Sometimes you just have to mess with the velocities of the notes and get them low enough to where you actually get the soft sample as opposed to just repeating one of the louder samples. So that's velocity layers in a nutshell. I'm also sure that someone will ask, can you do velocity layers and round robin? Yes, you can, but I'll let you figure that out on your own. You basically just have to create a velocity range within a round robin group. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.